Token Arthur was always curious about new things. One day, while flying over the jungle, he saw a group of animals exchanging goods and services using colorful stones. So he contacted FinTech CTOs from fantastic companies all around the world and collaborated with them to learn all about finance. Inspired, Arthur asked Insert CEO Vasil to help start a podcast to share their knowledge with the world. This is what you are watching right now, FinTech CTO Podcast. Enjoy.
Hello, FinTech leaders and builders. I'm Vasil Solshuk from Insert, and this is our next episode of FinTech CTO Podcast. And here we uncover the truth about how to build great FinTech products, teams, and companies. And our today's guest is a truly, I would say, serial tech founder who is really patient about building innovative FinTech products through teamwork, through data-driven design. And I'm really excited to welcome Scott Weinert, co-founder and CTO at Atomic, a financial connectivity platform. So welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Scott Weinert is a CTO and co-founder of several companies in the technology and financial sectors. His first co-founding experience was Imply Labs, a software-as-a-service company that developed predictive social commerce technologies. This company's recommendation engine was featured in prominent publications, like Mashable, WSJ, PC World, and Wired magazine. After Imply Labs was acquired in 2013, Scott co-founded Unbill, a FinTech app that facilitated card-based bill payments. Unbill was eventually acquired by Q2, and Scott took part in starting Atomic, his current occupation. Scott's expertise lies in product strategy, partnerships, user experience, security, and architecture. He is passionate about creating innovative products through teamwork, data-driven design, and industry knowledge.
So to start, Scott, can you please tell us maybe like some of your backgrounds and what are like three major facts about yourself?
Okay, sure. My background. So I started this company with Jordan Wright. He's the CEO and I'm the CTO. This actually isn't our first company together. So it would have been almost 10 years ago now. We started another company when we were college students. Our wives were both in the public health program at Brigham Young University in Utah. And so we actually met more through them, actually. And we started a business in the rental housing space for students. It was one of the few bad ideas that we put on a board one day. And we had a list of, 5 or 6, and we threw them all out and then came up with a new bad idea to create this business.
Okay.
And I think it was a family member wrote us a check for about $50,000, and we started making this thing. That's how we got going. It was a student housing platform, and this business, interestingly, it did well in Utah because it had a unique housing market. It didn't do well once we left Utah. So we moved our business to Austin, Texas, and started building there. And I think we had maybe $500,000 in the bank left when we decided that it wasn't really worth pursuing any longer. It ended up just being an ad budget game between us and Trulia and Zillow, which we weren't going to win. So we ended up pivoting to what we saw as a bigger problem in the space, which was bill splitting. So roommates splitting bills. And then we built a platform that allowed them to do that in a way that each roommate paid for their portion of the bill. So instead of, Venmoing back and forth how much we owe each other, everyone paid directly to the telco provider or electric provider their portion of the bill. And to do this, we had to build thousands of integrations with these different systems. And so what happened is people just started using this app not to split bills, but just to track and pay their bills in general. So we ended up building this tech, and that basically sucked us into FinTech. And we started going to FinTech conferences, selling the technology from a B2B side as well to banks. And that was when Q2 out of Austin, Texas, they were in our backyard. We didn't meet them there. We met them in New York, but
Mhm.
they were also had their HQ in Austin. They invited us over, and the short story is that they ended up acquiring our company and all the employees. And we stayed there for a while, building software for banks in their open banking division. So I was there for about 3 years, and it was a really great time. Scaling this software to work with NFCU and JP Morgan and some of the larger banks out there. Um, and yeah, after a while, Jordan and I decided to go at it again. We had such a good time the first time, and it can be really hard to find a co-founder that you just trust and work well with. And we were both interested in starting another one, so that led us to Atomic. So yeah, that's some background. I could go into the background of Atomic, but also we might go into that later in a little bit more
Yeah,
detail.
so I have a question about this. The first project that you actually launched.
Sure.
Is it the experience that you've done within the Imply Labs, or is it something else?
Yeah, good question. Imply Labs was not this particular company.
Mm-hmm.
That was another company that I worked on in the past. We did sentiment analysis and kind of a AI engine for product recommendations for people.
Mm-hmm.
So it would take their social media feed or information about them that was more publicly available back then than it is now. But anyways, and it would suggest gifts and things to buy them if you were trying to, get them a birthday present or something like that, right? So that was a different business that I worked on prior to Unbill, which was the bill pay platform.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, what was the trigger event actually to start this Imply Labs
Oh, the Imply
for
Labs.
yourself?
Yeah. So that was with Zach Oates, and I think the trigger was just that he had this idea and he needed a co-founder, so he showed up at my door, and he heard that
Okay.
I was good with startups and building tech, and I mean this was early days. I must have been early 20s, and so we ended up. It sounded like a really interesting problem, and I think back then I was more interested in hard engineering problems than I was in building a business. And so the engineering challenge of it was attractive to me. And so I jumped in and I said, I don't know if I can do this, but it sounds fun to try. And we ended up building that engine over there. It was pretty neat because one of the issues was just training data to build something like that.
Mhm.
And to be able to scan people's social media and make sense of it, what we did was we took a dump of Wikipedia's data. And Wikipedia's data is really neat because it's actually connected in like a tree, if you will, with a bunch of branches. It's all interconnected. So what you could do is scan text and then make sense of it and figure out, like in say a larger volume of text, you could find context and certain things would start to jump out because you could find that they were connected by using Wikipedia's data. So it was a pretty
Mhm.
fun engineering challenge. I think I learned a lot. But I'd say one of the biggest lessons I learned was at the end of the day, it's not good enough to just create something neat, that's fun to work on. You have to create something that actually makes money and is sustainable. So,
Okay.
helping people
So,
find birthday presents wasn't the best, I think, use of that technology.
so, as I understand, you have co-founded several businesses together with Jordan and the Unbill. Have you founded this company together with Jordan as well?
Yeah, we made Unbill together, and that was the
Mhm.
going back to the kind of the story I told of the rental housing situation.
Mhm.
Unbill was a pivot out of that business. We pivoted into the connected bill space. And that was
Okay.
Unbill.
Okay. Yeah. So as soon as you have, this experience co-founding a number of companies already, and so our audience, there are lots of people who are actually sitting in a big corporation and maybe thinking about starting their own businesses, having the experience. in the bigger enterprise, and I have seen lots of success stories here as well. But again, maybe what would be your message, like a lessons learned that you can share some insights that actually you now use for Atomic, but the lessons learned from your past experiences co-founding the previous companies.
Yeah. Oh man, there's so many.
Yeah, but like, what are the major ones? So as soon as you're
Sure.
like tech leader, tech founder, so
Mhm.
maybe some major ones, some the most important that the somebody who is actually sitting and thinking like and maybe analyzing how to start and what
Mhm.
to focus on. So what would be your message for those type of for those type of people?
Sure, sure. So I would say one of the lessons that would be a recurring theme throughout all the businesses I've created, and kind of differentiates ones where I have been successful versus ones where I haven't. Because I think the road to successful entrepreneurship, at least for most people, like normal people like me, there's going to be some failures along the way, and that's where you learn and decide, hey, do I enjoy
Mhm.
this? Even when I fail, do I still enjoy this? And do I want to get back up and keep going? Right. I personally absolutely love both the success, and in some ways, I even love the failure. And I think that process of failing and learning, you end up on this growth curve. At least I do personally. And it can be almost addictive to be pushed and challenged like that time and time again. You end up liking that feeling, and even without the failure of a startup, there are tons of micro failures while you're creating a company, and enjoying each of those steps, I think, is part of, like, a personal question: is that something you're going to enjoy or not? Right. The other thing
Mhm.
I would say, in some businesses I've created early on, I didn't really optimize for early traction. I think that's easy to miss. I think you can have this big vision of what you want to accomplish,
Mhm.
but unless you break it down and find where you're going to get really early traction to show for it, that grand vision can almost be a stumbling block, because you're thinking so far ahead that you can't, put rubber to road, so to speak, and get that early traction that you really need to get funding, to get the
Mhm.
morale to continue, to get some,
Mhm.
some spark, some maybe first revenue in, just to show that there's validation behind what you're doing. So, an
Mhm.
example would be at Atomic. We work with some of the largest banks in the United States now, and we work with a number of the top five, a whole lot of the top 20. But we didn't go for any of those customers in year one or even year two,
Mhm.
and the reason was the sales cycles are very long. The compliance you need to do business with those customers, it takes a long time. The engineering
Mhm.
teams, even the best, it takes a lot of people to coordinate to actually launch a
Mhm.
new feature or product. So if you look at that situation, early traction, hard to pull off. You either need to raise a lot of funding to survive all that, or you can take a different approach. And what we did is we went after the smaller fintechs. I guess some of them weren't small. Like Chime was one of our first customers, so not so small. But
Okay.
uh, the difference was Chime, in 2 to 3 weeks, could pull something together, a feature, and start prototyping it and launch it. We just didn't see that in the big banks, right? So
Mhm.
optimizing for early traction, these fintechs could launch our embedded feature, we were adding to their platform. They could launch it so quickly, and that let us get early data, let us get early revenue, and get subsequent rounds of funding. And then eventually, our goal was always to go after those bigger banks and work on that market. But it would have been a bad choice in the early days. So I could go to some other. I'll pause there, though. I think optimizing for early traction is one of the things that I think a
Mhm.
lot about, and whenever we're considering, hey, should we go after this new group of customers, I think about traction, how that's going to affect traction. If we need to raise more money, you know, what's that going to look like? Not just in 5 years, but what's that going to look like in the next 6 months for our company, for our teams? Is it going to create a lot of forward momentum or not?
Yeah, and totally agree with you that you shouldn't be afraid of failing, because actually you learn out of this. So if you achieve some success, I don't know. So I always, as for myself, I always learn more when I fail with something rather than I achieve some level of success. Uh, and speaking about the traction, again, according to Crunchbase, you have raised something like 68.6 million at Atomic in total in all the rounds. And my question to this point is actually, and you have done already like Series A, Series B, but my question is here, like, what is harder actually to get? Like, is it pre-seed, seed, round A, round B? So what is harder? Like, mm, because
Yeah,
on each stage of the company you have your challenges, and maybe on the early stage it's even harder than on the later stage to attract the initial capital, actually to get this traction. So what's your experience on that?
sure. So I think there are a number of factors here, and my experience has been different depending on was I a first time founder? I think for a first time founder, getting that initial seed round, and I'm not
Hmm.
talking about friends and family. Usually they believe in you. My mom believes in me.
Okay.
My mom would fund me all day, right? Uh,
Okay.
she always has. So um, for an early founder, that seed round can be tricky. Um, unless you just know people and you're well connected, it can be tricky to get that, because I think investors at that round, at least the ones that invested early on in me and Jordan, is they weren't necessarily so attracted to the idea of what we were pitching. They're betting on like the jockey, right? They wanted to know, maybe these founders, their idea is not good, but are they the type that even with a bad idea, they're going to figure it out and be able to iterate to success, right? So you want to show that you're that type of founder. I think to early investors, I think
Mhm.
pivots are all too common for successful companies in the early days, right? So I would be thinking, as if I was an investor, I'd be thinking, is this the type of founder that can successfully make a pivot? Can they emotionally detach themselves from maybe this initial idea if needed and move in a better direction, right? Um,
Mhm.
I would think if you're a second time founder, then the early funding, especially if you've been successful, early funding can come pretty easily, I think. So I'd say our seed round, we could go back to investors we had in our last company that had an exit with us, and they would be quick to give up good funding. So, Chris Schonk at ATX Seed, for example, was in our first company. He would go ahead and give us money very quickly if we wanted to start another one, right? Which is what we did. Um, I would
So
say,
if you're sorry for interrupting, but if
go
you're
ahead.
not the first, if you're actually the first time founder, and you don't have this experience fundraising specifically, to start the new company, and you can't show this experience, you may have some connections, but you do not have the success story behind you. So what would be maybe your advice for those type of, again, people like who actually will do their first pre-seed seed round the very first time without this
Yeah,
experience, past experience?
right. Um, I think my advice it would be pretty traditional. I think it's nothing groundbreaking. I mean, if you've read Lean Startup or one of those books, there's a bunch of them
Hmm.
now. You need to uh, you need to go and do the work. Come
Hmm.
up with a compelling business plan. You also need to find mentors. So you need to find people that have done this before, and that can help you along the way with the different steps. For example, I live in Spokane, Washington, and we do something called Startup Spokane. And years ago, I would go to this as a contestant, and I would pitch a business idea, and I would assemble a team and practice pitching investors and all that. And it was so fun, and I learned so much. Right, over an entire weekend, just one weekend, we tried to build a business. So getting involved in your community with those things. I show up now, and I'm a mentor to those founders that are wanting to get involved. Right, so find things like that in your area. I think it's a great way to meet people that would like to fund your business, people that would like to mentor you, and maybe even a co-founder. I think, on that note, like find a great co-founder. I think as your first business, at least from my experience, and maybe I'm biased, it can be invaluable to have someone else that you can work with on this.
Mhm.
Just not being siloed and single-minded, having an outside opinion. And when investors come to give you money, you can show that you have synergy with this person, that you have synergy with this co-founder, pitch together, show that you are a team. And I think that's very attractive to getting early funding. So this would be a couple tips. I mean, going back to the lean startup stuff for a second, get
Mhm.
out there and don't stay in the building. Like whatever your idea is, you want to show investors that you've gotten out there, you've talked to people. So, for example, we wanted to build something at one point, for fun at a startup weekend. We were doing something for the gig economy, and like
Mhm.
actually having footage of us we would just take Uber and Lyft rides to random places just to talk to our customer and get out there and hear the voice of the customer. We take video of ourselves,
Mhm.
pictures of ourselves, have quotes from these people. But there's like this
Okay.
getting outside the building, showing that you're scrappy and you can like go from 0 to 1. Whatever you can do to demonstrate that, I think is the best way, not only to get insights about what you're building, but to show investors that you are the type of founder that is willing to do what it takes to get the information you need to make strategic decisions and move forward with your plan.
Mhm. Mhm. So that's great. You actually mentioned this regarding the, like, let's say, the customer discovery. Yeah, like going and talking to clients. But if you're in B2B space and your target, the target audience will be some B2B, and you need to get to these decision makers, how would you do this, being just an early stage startup who's looking for like a seed rounds, but still need to do this customer discovery with real people from real companies, to understand and to verify actually what are their pain points, what actually they need, and test your idea early
Sure.
stage.
Yeah. Um, Eric Ries talks a lot about this in his book, but I would just say that
Hmm.
you need to get in contact with them. You need to be able to interview them. The first barrier is just access to your ideal customer, and I think the best way to do it is just to you're asking them for help to get their thoughts on a concept or idea. You're not going in there and saying, "Hey, I want to sell you something," yet, right? You
Okay.
can circle back at some point and sell them, but in the early days, I think people generally just love to help other people. I love doing mentorship. I grow from it, and I get
Hmm.
to hear and connect with other people. And I think a lot of business leaders, maybe not all of them, but they really are willing to help you grow your business. I mean, they at one point were probably in your stage as well, and they know what it's like. So if you're like, "Hey, I just want to ask you some questions about the industry, the market. I want to get your thoughts on this new idea I've had, and let me know if you think this has any legs in the." And maybe they could even at some point be like an advisor to your company or something like that, right? So there's ways to get in the door, and I think that's where you start. And then eventually, if they're really interested and they're like, "Hey, if you build this, we would use it." That's what you want to know. And if they say something like that, then the next question is, okay, what would you
Hmm.
pay for it? Start to understand your pricing, right? Take it a step further. And then eventually they could really end up being your customer or, running a pilot program with them. Depending on how far you want to go down the runway before raising money, like those early companies that you work with can help you get there.
Hmm. So speaking about the next round, like Series A and then Series B, uh,
Yeah.
so the question is, so at what point of time you actually make this decision that, okay, so now we get enough traction, so we have some KPIs, maybe some metrics, and now we need Series A. So why actually you needed Series A, and what was maybe like these KPIs or these moments when you decided, okay, we need this?
Sure. um, so when it comes to raising money, just a rule that one of my early investors told us, which I think was great advice, is you want to raise money when it wants to be raised, and not the other way around. So
Okay.
you don't want to be raising money when you need it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
You want to be raising it when investors are basically knocking on your door trying to give it to you, and you know, so it's less. The reality is that it was less KPI driven. It was less
Mhm.
metric driven. Our raises. It had much more to do with market conditions, interest in our space, um, and just getting terms that were favorable. And if investors are throwing money at you, then you're going to get better terms, far better terms than if you know you just need to raise because you're running out of money. That's not a good situation. uh,
Okay.
I would say that, Series A, we needed to show market traction. We needed to show that, we were getting the customers that we said we were going to get. We had some numbers out there as far as volume, we thought we could do we were doing, direct deposit switching mostly when we were doing our Series A, or, allowing users to connect their payroll account to their bank, and we would automatically move their direct deposit over to this
Mhm.
bank, which allowed the bank to have a much more profitable user. It's very, very important. It's the lifeblood of most banks, right? So shark bite problem. We needed to show that that we had the conversion rate for these users, meaning a user comes top of funnel. Could they log into their payroll system? Did they know their
Mhm.
credentials? Could they then go in and complete the direct deposit switch? And were our customers willing to pay for those switches? So we needed to show all those things at some level of scale. Was really when we
Mhm.
could go ahead and raise a Series A, which we did. Um, yeah, so Series A, I think, you need to show that traction, and ideally, your current investors are wanting to double down on you, right? You're
Mhm.
showing that, hey, we told you we'd do something, we did it, and they're going to want to come back and put more money into your company. So that was when we brought Greylock in at the Series A. That's when they started being involved, and also
Mhm.
Core as well.
But you mentioned that actually when investors are knocking into a door, so this is the best moment to fundraise. Does it mean that before Series A, as I understand, you were still burning more money than owning, or not? Because if you actually burning more, so you have negative cash flow anyway. At some point of time, you need to fundraise just to keep going the scale in the company. Or were you already profitable at this point of time? What does it mean
Yeah,
that investors? Because if investors are not knocking at your door and you're negative, you need to fundraise anyway.
totally. Yeah, you do. Um, Definitely. And to this day, we still aren't profitable. I'd say we're close. There's a
Mhm.
good chance we are this year, actually. But
Mhm.
even when we raised our Series B, we still weren't profitable. But I think we always kept probably a few years of runway in the bank,
Mhm.
and that's and that still stands today. I mean, we
Okay.
could go a few years right now without being profitable at our current
Mhm.
burn rate and still have plenty of money left over. So I think it's not that if we wanted to be profitable right now, we probably could. We could just cut costs and say, hey, we want to be profitable. That's not our goal right now, and you need to show investors that show them what your plan is, when you plan on becoming profitable and why. I mean, it's not always ideal to become profitable. Like, we're spinning up some new product lines right now, and that's what our investors want us to do. They say, hey, you know, what else could you do? What you have some of the best customers in the world. Like, instead of becoming profitable, why don't you go see if you can tackle this problem or that problem? And,
Mhm.
we pitch them on directions we could go. So yeah, investors sometimes aren't very interested in you becoming profitable. They want you to grow
Okay.
and grow and grow, right? That's what they're not looking for
Yeah.
doubling their money. They want to 10x their money, right? So
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. But anyway, so it's very important to keep an eye on finance very carefully during the growth stage. What would be if you can share this? So you already shared that you have a significant amounts, to keep going as a risk buffer, as I understand, on your bank account. But uh, what are the tips, like budgeting tips, would you mention that are important for the growth stage startups? Again, especially when you allocate in resources like between different departments, different projects, different initiatives, having different priorities. So, what would be some of these budgeting tips for the growth stage
Yeah,
startups?
sure. Um, I think this is also just a conversation between founders and their investors of what they want to achieve. What's their perception
Mhm.
of the TAM, the total addressable market that they're chasing? For example, if I have a total addressable market of $100, right?
Mhm.
Spending $20 to chase it sounds like a lot of money, right? And so you're spending 1/5 of your total addressable market to chase this opportunity. I look at like in the early days with Unbill, when we were a direct to consumer application, the total addressable market, it was really large, but our cost per acquisition was really high to get a user in, a paying active user, right? So that in a consumer based startup, that was something we looked at, like what are we willing to spend to acquire these users, and that's something that investors are going to look at with that particular space. When you're B2C like that, they're going to look at your cost per acquisition, and you need to keep a close eye on that and make sure it's sustainable. And then, now that we're B2B at Atomic, we'll spend a lot of money acquiring a large bank because it's worth a whole lot to us, and the total addressable market is massive. Not with just what we're doing now, but what we plan on doing and continuing to
Mhm.
expand and provide additional products and services to these banks. And so we'll invest heavy capital in those initiatives, and over becoming profitable, like choosing not to become profitable and continue to chase that. Right. So I think it depends. A lot of it depends. There's also a factor of, what are your competitors doing? At Atomic, we've been in historically a hyper
Mhm.
competitive space. Us and a couple other companies, we've all raised north of $70 million, and we're all deep into our Series B. And so, sometimes it felt like we were raising just because the space was raising, like our competitors were raising. So it's like, oh, like,
Okay.
sometimes we raised first and then they would follow on, but there's kind of this back and forth game. And it shouldn't matter, I feel like, but it does. When a big bank comes to vet your company, they want to see that you've got a war chest of funding and that you've got enough and you're not going to disappear tomorrow, right? And so
Mhm.
that also matters, and you got to take that into account. So there's a lot of factors that I think are variables that are situational, I would say.
Mhm.
But yeah, it just depends on, like I said, like your competitive landscape, your market, and what have you and your investors agreed to go after and spend on
Mhm.
that opportunity.
Mhm. All right. So, let's talk about the business model actually, and about the value proposition that Atomic has for the market. So maybe let's start from how do you envision, what is the mission for Atomic as of now?
Yeah. So our mission has historically been to enable financial mobility, preferably upwards mobility of individuals. And so, that, for example, our early product, being able to automatically switch your direct deposit,
Mhm.
it gave people portability if they want to switch banks to, move where their income goes. We took out a great deal of the friction, in some cases, pretty much all of it, for users to do that. So I think it allowed people to get out of banks that weren't serving their needs and get into a better situation, right? And so facilitating that first product, that's how it facilitated and helped us drive towards our mission. I think, one of the things we're working on right now that we're piloting is it's called Paylink, and it's the ability for users to connect their bills. So not only moving their direct deposit over to a new bank, but the next thing is, okay, I've moved my income. What about my spend? Right. So we're allowing people to move their bills, their subscriptions, all into this new bank that they've decided to bank with, right? And we're automating that process in a really unique way. And then, so now that they move their payments over, one of the things that we're doing as well is we're tracking all their subscriptions. Subscriptions are nuts nowadays. Who knows how many we have, right? Who knows how many of the ones we have we actually use, and how much we're paying for those, right? So, allowing people to have transparency and visibility into all those subscriptions they're paying. And then, the Intel side is cool, right? But what hasn't been done that we're doing is the action layer. So people could say, hey, pause this subscription right from their bank, and our system will automatically do that for them through their connected account. Or, hey, switch my plan or change my pay date. I can't pay this day, but I could pay in a week from now when my income comes in. We can move those payments to a different date. So I think this is something that has never been done before, is giving users that, I call it like mission control inside of your bank, where you can actually do those things without even interacting with these third-party services. It's almost like, we're essentially going out and doing this stuff for users and automating it. So we're really excited that's one of the things we're moving into, is just allowing people to take their financial life, completely control it, and even move it to another financial institution if it better suits them.
So I have just recently had this experience when I was reviewing my bank transactions, my personal bank transactions, and I've seen some name of the company and some it was like a small amount, but anyway, I didn't recognize what was that. I started to search, and I have eventually found out that this was some trial subscription for some of the service. Just to try, but eventually they had this policy that if you do not cancel, so it's been renewed, and then they continue just billing you for this service. But I also started to search how I can unsubscribe, but I was not able to find the way to unsubscribe quickly
Isn't
from
that
this
crazy?
service.
Yeah.
And you sometimes you have this experience, and you just have some of these transactions on your bill account. So, and sometimes it's easier even not to go and chase whether to cancel or this subscription or not. So, all right.
Yeah. In the next 2 years, you'll be able to do that from your bank. And
Okay.
the crazy thing is even when you do want to cancel, there's going to be a lot of times there's 5, 6, 7 steps. They want to confirm. Are you sure you want to cancel? Here's a discount to stay, and then you got to jump through all these hoops before it's actually canceled. I just did the same thing. I was kind of trying our own product, and I found some odd subscriptions that I didn't even know I was paying for. I mean, you're not an exception. I think that's the story for most people, and generally, I think many people have no idea all the things that they're actually paying for. So we're looking to solve that, not just the portability of those payments, but actually the complete management and control once you even know what's going on. So yeah, really thrilled about it. And I think it's one thing that I think users are asking banks to make possible. And it's right in our wheelhouse. It's what we do at Atomic, that this connected experience. And so that's where we're, kind of headed into right now is building that. It's pretty far along. So we're excited.
So you have several product lines. So you have Employer Link, you have User Link, and you have Paylink. So what is the primary revenue stream for yourself right now? And what was the initial value prop for the market when you started?
Yeah, great question. And our primary revenue stream is our deposit switching product by far right now. And it was interesting because when we started this company, I would say if you looked at the TAM of each opportunity we could chase and you did an analysis, I think anyone would say that the verification of income and the actual payroll data itself was the most valuable. That was like the gold, right? The most valuable opportunity. If you think of use cases like mortgage and just lending in general, microloans, all those types of things, this payroll data, how much money someone's going to receive would be a catalyst to enable that and make it less, reduce fraud, reduce onboarding costs. I think that was probably the mainstay. But when we looked at the space and started selling the different products that you could derive from a payroll system, deposit switching just caught on like fire. It was just, the timing was perfect. Everybody wanted it. It was a higher, it was just it was a higher yield per transaction, even though it wasn't necessarily a recurring revenue stream. These businesses all had more users coming in every day, so it felt recurring in a lot of ways to us, and it still does. So, I think this goes back to my example of optimizing for traction. I think our grand vision, yes, we'll get into the payroll data. We're doing it now. We'll continue to do more of it as time goes on. But the market was most ready for the deposit switching product. That was the one to go with to lead into our Series A and even our Series B. And, payroll data continues to get traction, but I think the market is now warming up to it. But it's almost like it couldn't single-handedly unlock the lending process. There are other things that also are at play here. It kind of sits in a lot of cases in more of like a waterfall. Like sometimes it's used, and I think the market is learning to trust it over time. But initially, it was kind of, the market has been set in its ways for like decades, and I think introducing something totally new takes time for them to say, hey, this actually works. We trust this. We're going to send more traffic to it and whatnot. Whereas deposit switching just hit the ground running. And so I think that's a good example of it. I think especially as, if rates go down and mortgage rates go down, then, our payroll data product will also start to get a lot more traction because there's just more lending going on and more volume. And I think that's where it shines, when you just want to do a lot of volume and, not have so much overhead cost in underwriting. This payroll data product is really, really powerful. But the timing and everything, direct deposit switching was definitely the one to lead with. And I remember we sat down in a meeting as a leadership team and we discussed this for like 2 days. And we're like, should we? But the payroll data is so valuable. It has such a big TAM. Should we go all into that? And it was like, guys, I think we should optimize for traction here. Everybody wants to buy this right now. And we had to choose between the two, like which one we were going to primarily focus on, because we didn't have, like 70 or 100 people like we do now, right? So that's what we decided to do. And we look back at that as one of the most influential, like pivotal and strategic moves we made as a company, was to optimize in that way.
So actually, you mentioned several times this, but how do you structure the customer segments for yourself? As soon as you're like in B2B, but you also serve the end users. So what would be the structure of your customers?
The structure of our customers, meaning how do our customers add us to their stack?
Who are your so who are your primary customers, like direct customers? Who are your users? So how do you structure this?
Sure.
Because you mentioned like you work with like top 5 banks out of 20, and still you serve the end clients and users. So the value prop looks like focused on the end users anyway, but looks like you sell and you're gonna sell through the banks. So how do you structure this like customer and user segments, and maybe the channels, how you actually deliver the product to them?
Sure. So you could say that we're B2B2C in that, Chime, for example, if you go in there and you want to move your direct deposit, you'll have the option to use Atomic to do that. And we have an SDK that is embedded inside the application. And when it kind of like Plaid, if you will, it's very much like Plaid's model, if you're familiar with it, where the user would say, I want to move my deposit. It launches our user experience. And in that user experience, the user would log into their payroll system. And we've developed some technology for this that's really neat, that allows the user to do so without even sharing their credentials with us or with anybody. It all stays on their device, nice and secure. They go ahead and do that, and then we're able to, update their direct deposit settings in the payroll system. And then they're returned back to the Chime user experience afterwards, right? So that would be one example, and we're embedded in that same way with both big banks and small banks, and some other earned wage access providers use our technology as well. And as part of that process, they might be moving the direct deposit, and in the earned wage access case, they may also need to pull your data and verify your income so that they can figure out how much can they safely lend out to you in the next 30 days or so, right? So they're going to look at your pay history, how long have you been there, what do your statements look like, that type of information as well. And so we're always kind of embedded inside the financial application. We don't actually have something that services users directly. It's always our SDK living inside of US Bank or Chime or Spruce by H&R Block or Robinhood or Moneyline, you name it. We're an SDK like Plaid would be inside of these systems.
So do you see Plaid as your primary competitor or not?
No, they're actually a partner of ours, and they use our service for a number of the verification of income cases. And they don't do direct deposit switching. That's something that they'd partner with us on. So yeah, they're a valued partner. They're not a competitor. Interestingly enough, though, in the early days, they did announce that they were going to get into the direct deposit switching space after we did, because I think they saw it as an opportunity with their own customers, right? I mean, we have our mutual customer list is very long. So, and that got us really worried when they announced that. We called up our investors, I think, and we said, "Oh, guys, Plaid's getting into this space. I don't know what we're going to do." But what was really neat about this was our early customers. They got Plaid's pitch and they got ours, and they a lot of times they didn't sway them at all. They just stayed with us. And later on, I asked them, why didn't you entertain that more? They're Plaid. They're like they're an amazing company.
I have seen many times this story when you actually, you build your product around some pain point on the market that you have identified, but eventually you have a bigger company in the same space that they don't have this feature yet, okay? But they can announce and they can maybe easily deliver this feature. So how would you actually turn the market into your favors and maybe prevents this kind of situation when a bigger player, as you said, Plaid, they announced that they will enter the same product. They will launch the similar product that you have. Did you talk with them about having the partnership, or did you have any conversations with them or not? So
Sure.
how you tackle this situation?
Yeah. Did we have any conversations with Plaid? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. So did you have this conversation? Should you have this conversation? So how would you tackle the situation when the bigger player announce that they now will deliver the very same feature
happens all the
within
time.
their platform as you do, and you are the smaller player on the market, on the similar market?
Yeah, really common situation in entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And I'll have to be careful how much I say, but I think in the early days, we went over there to San Francisco. We met their team. We talked in person, and we had a lot of discussions about what we were headed to do. And they have a great team over there. One thing I really admire about Plaid is just they are builders at heart. They love to build things. They're I think they've made some acquisitions perhaps, but at the end of the day, they're a company that's likely to build, not buy. And that's because they have amazing talent over there. So I would say, so generally speaking, before getting into building a company, it's always a good idea to ask, like, I'm going to go do this. I think it's a good idea. The market says they want it. Like, am I the right one to, am I the right person to build this? Are we the right company to build this? Like, is there a company out there that is better suited to build this? Because maybe they
Mhm.
have all the customers, or they have some experience that you don't, or who knows what it is, right? Maybe there's some, like, what's the perfect company to solve this problem? And a lot of times, if that answer is like Google or Apple, I will, might steer in a different direction and really think about, is this something that I really think I can pull off, right? um, and in this case, Jordan and I already had a lot of experience with building a company that connected to thousands of disparate systems that weren't designed to talk or have APIs or Rails or anything to do this
Mhm.
and make it work. And I think when I talk to our customers later on, because at first I wasn't going to look a gift horse in the mouth and ask, "Hey, why did you continue to choose us when this other vendor of yours that you've been working with for years is potentially having a similar offering?" I think one of their responses were interesting. They really, one of them said, "I would take your A team over their B team." And, they saw the value in having a team that had so much skin in the game, where if they didn't make this work, they were gone. We also let them weigh in on our roadmap. This was not something that you can get with a big company. We let them weigh in on our roadmap, give us input on how our product should be designed. Robinhood, great customer, so user centric. I learned a ton from their design team. They did an extensive user research analysis on how people would respond, their users would respond to this product and each touch point.
Mhm.
And then they gave that to us and instructed us on, "Hey, here's how you could design this, or here's this part of your funnel. I think users would respond really well to this, to doing it this way." And so their ability to interact with us and get that kind of white glove at ground level, like, design pass into our company, I think that gave us a huge advantage. And they also saw that we had to make this work or our company was done. And so I think their confidence in our ability to pull this off was very, very high. We didn't have a huge revenue line to go back to if this failed. This was our revenue line. We couldn't just ditch the
Mhm.
project. If we ditched the project, our company was done. So that level, you can show that level of commitment and that kind of really personalized service where it is such a partnership. They're not buying your service; they are partnering with you to create the future. And I think that's why we were able to do what we did.
Yeah, I think that's great story, really. Let's talk about team and execution a little bit. So, when you start, and you mentioned that you have a great partner, and when you start, it's even crucial, because you need to make the right decisions to move forward. As you grow, you have more and more team members now, and you have hundreds of people in the company now. So, and there's another level of challenges here, probably. So, can you tell us, please, how big is the current team at Atomic? So, overall, maybe under yourself, reporting to yourself, just to understand the structure and the size.
Yeah. Overall, I think we're around 75 employees, and under me, between 30 and 40 is probably 35 or so engineers and product and design folks. So um,
Hmm.
yeah, that's the size. And I'll preface anything I'm going to say about this has been trial and error for me, because I've never built a company with more than 10 engineers in the past, and I've tried a number of team structures that didn't work. And I think some folks would look at me and say, "Hey, instead of trying to be so creative and fancy about your team structures, why didn't you just read a book and do the thing that traditionally works?" Right? And so, but hopefully anything I say will be
So, do
instructive
you
to.
follow any framework to structure the engineering and product teams?
Yeah, I think we came up with, like, theories of how our teams could best be structured for what we do. We have a little
Hmm.
bit of it's unique in that when you're building a company that has hundreds, if not thousands, of integrations that you have to maintain across different product lines, it's a little bit less traditional, I think, in how you need to structure your teams. And so I've tried some things that didn't work that I'm happy to go into, and I think we're in a really good spot right now. But it wasn't until fairly recently that I feel like we've really landed in a good place, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. In your profile, you actually also mentioned that you like to innovate and define this innovative product strategies, which will be also like data driven. So can you explain a little bit? So how would you define what is innovation for yourself and what is not?
What is innovation for myself? I think at Atomic, this really goes back to really early days, where
Mhm.
we were trying to raise our Series A, and we pitched a number of investors, and most of them were interested, but there was one that wasn't, and it
Okay.
was Benchmark. And I think they'd be okay with me sharing this, but they passed on investing in us. And Sarah Tavel, she is brilliant. She's one of the partners there. And she asked us a question that we didn't have a good answer to. And that was one of the reasons she passed on investing in our company. And the
Mm-hmm.
question she asked us was, how do you escape competition?
Mm-hmm.
And that
Okay.
question is so good. It is so good. Like, we have asked ourselves that question, I swear, like every month, Jordan and I will sit and just talk about that question since we started our business. Um, and I'll tell you why. Because A, we didn't have a good answer initially. I mean, we're all working on the same payroll rails, us and a couple other really well funded companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, how do you actually differentiate and innovate in a
Mm-hmm.
space? Not just innovate, but innovate beyond what anyone else is doing, right? And so, as we learned more about the rails, the space, what was possible, what wasn't, our customers would challenge us with new things. This question always came up with different answers over time. So it was like a timeless, I'll call it like a power question that we could ask ourselves over and over again. And sometimes we'd sit there and throw our hands up and say, I don't have anything for you today. But other times we'd have these breakthrough answers where, like, we could do this. That would actually differentiate us in a meaningful way. And like, that is the reason why this last year, asking this question, we won every single RFP with a top 20 bank that we were involved in,
Mm-hmm.
every single one. And it's because we found ways to differentiate from our competition in a meaningful way. And we couldn't have known when we started the business how we'd do that. And so I think when I think of innovation, I think it's a lot about it's asking the right questions at the right time, and continuing to ask those questions has been a key to our innovation at Atomic. Um, Another example I'll cite was Josh McFarland from Greylock. So he's a current investor in ours. Anyways, great guy, very smart. Whenever he talks, I listen. And at one point, he asked us, I think we are doing maybe 5 million in ARR at the time. And he asked us, how do you make this 100 million in ARR? Which was, for me, a huge mental leap, right? Like, I'm just thinking about our next 4 or 5 million. I'm not thinking 100 million. And I
Okay.
hope to get there someday, right? But it totally changes the way you think when you ask a
Mm-hmm.
question like that. So we started, okay, let's not just give an answer. Let's do a whole exercise. Let's get on the whiteboard and start laying out what are the roads that would lead us to that, right? We had our product team involved, and it was like a vision expanding exercise to even talk about this. And it's enabled us to focus a lot on innovation long term, not just the short term next few million in ARR, but long term, how do we actually do something that it's going to be a multiple higher than what we're doing now? So it just kind of puts you at a whole new level, I think. So I
Mm-hmm.
think innovation starts with the right questions, and that's been my
Mm-hmm.
experience so far.
So how would you keep this culture of innovation with your engineering and product teams?
Yeah, I mean, Andrea Martone runs our product team, and I would say that she's better at this than Jordan and I put together.
Okay.
But she is very much about like deep understanding of the problem and deep understanding of our customers. And I think that's that's what makes her so valuable to our company. Because when you have that type of understanding, it comes back to asking the right questions. And I think that's just I guess it's a really short answer for me is continually be a question asking team, and that starts at the leadership level. That starts at the people that are running the organizations and approaching the problems. They need to approach them thoughtfully, and as you have your teams, you include your teams in this process. So you don't just ask a question, then come back to your teams and say, "Hey guys, here's the answer. Here's what we should do." Right? I think it's making sure that they're involved. They see the data. If you're doing a survey or research, right? They see the data. They're part of creating this research, part of talking to customers. You get them out there and you have them in calls with your highest profile clients. We'll include our
Mhm.
designers, and they may not have much to say in the call, but the fact that they're there means they're getting firsthand information from the customer. So as much as you can like expose your teams to that data, I think the better they're all going to be on the same page. And not when you go to build something, they understand everything that happened before that and what led our company to go make that decision. I think they just are more motivated and build better products that way too. So, yeah.
Scott, to wrap up our conversation, maybe my very last question. So, what do you see as a next big move for Atomic? Again, maybe taking into account some of the market trends, tech trends that we see. I don't know, AI, analytics related to, again, payments data,
Sure.
transactional data, something else. So, what would be the next big move?
Yeah. Um, Great question. I think Paylink is a catalyst for I think a lot of what we're going to do. We really are aiming to be the action layer of financial services. I think AI has been excellent in analyzing a situation and providing insights, but building a company that just does insights is not very interesting, I think.
Mhm.
And I think taking those insights are only valuable to the extent that they result in a decision, in an action taken that actually drives
Mhm.
value for everybody involved, including the bank, including the end user, and us being able to capture part of that. So, I think if you go look at the last OpenAI like Dev Day, uh, it was it was interesting that they are thinking a lot about this, and uh, they've gotten very good at providing information and analyzing data, and now they're letting developers say, okay, well, I'm gonna, you know, could we structure this data in a way that, say, a programming language could understand and then make decisions and actually take actions on behalf of users, right? So I think there's a general theme I think in the industry on this is like, when is it going to happen? When are we going to get to the point where we're not just talking and looking at insights and interesting data, but decisions are being made, and then the user doesn't even have to do anything. They don't have to lift a finger, and the outcome is taken care of for them. So like, if I want to go switch my auto insurance, right? There's a new quote that comes in. The reason a lot of folks wouldn't touch it, even if it's better, is because it's such a pain. You got to go take all your data from one system, put it all into another system. Like, what if it was just, you want to do this? Okay, consider it done. Like power of attorney as a service. Atomic will take
Mhm.
care of that for you on your behalf. And you have access to financial outcomes that you need that you didn't have before simply because the effort was too high. So we're going to be taking the effort out of it so that users can get access to the things that are the best for them. And so I think that's where we're headed, is that actual action platform, right? I think it's mostly focused right now on financial primacy, allowing user to move between financial institutions. But if you look at everything we've had to build to make that possible, it's right access. It is action that the user's saying they want, and then we're going and doing it for them.
Mhm.
So that whole platform is very expansive in what it could possibly do in the future in financial services. And that's where we're headed. I think that's our next big move.
Yeah, great. So I really like this idea that the platform shouldn't be built just on the insights, but you need to think about what would be the next steps, how you can use these insights for uh, actual decision making and for actual actions going forward. So, Scott, thank you very much for sharing all this experience that you had with Atomic and with the previous companies. And I really enjoyed these insights how to fundraise on early stage, later stage. So, this is very valuable for our audience. And also, I think that all the founders and the C levels should be thinking how to escape the competition, because my personal opinion that competition actually kills the company. You eventually you will get into competition anyway. How if you're unique, somebody will do
Yeah.
something the
If you have a
same.
good idea, people will come. Yeah.
Yes,
So,
and you
yeah.
need to keep going, and thinking and doing and trying to escape this competition. So, Scott, thank you very much.
Thank you for what you're doing. I think this is a great program. I've enjoyed listening to some of the other interviews that you've done with some of the founders, and yeah, it's awesome. So thank you for helping build this community, and always happy to contribute. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you to all fintech leaders and builders who are watching us today. So, like our video and put your comments below this video, put your questions here, and also share the link to this podcast with your colleagues. I think there are lots of valuable insights here. And as Scott said, so we're building a fintech community here. And this is how YouTube works. So the more you share, the more fintech builders and leaders can know about us. And thank you again. It
Okay.
was me, Vasil from Insart, and Scott Weinert from Atomic. Let's keep building fintech together. Bye.
See ya.
Still watching us and have not subscribed yet? Let's fix this. Also, don't forget to like this video and take a look at the other episodes we have. See ya!